I am so thrilled and excited to introduce all of you to Orly Erez Likhovski. Here's a little bit of her background. Orly holds a bachelor's degree. Can you see me? Do we need to stand or can you see? Okay, good. Orly holds a bachelor's degree from a bachelor's degree in law from Tel Aviv University. She interned at Israel's Supreme Court. She got a master's degree in law with a focus on human rights at Columbia University in New York. She's a member of the Bar Association both in Israel and New York and has served as an attorney at Israel's Religious Action Center since 2004 for 19 years, as director of the legal department for many years and director of Israel's Religious Action Center since 2021. I know many of you know her predecessor, Anat Hoffman, who is beloved in our community. Orly has brought about significant legal achievements in Israel, such as making gender segregation on public transportation illegal, ending the Orthodox monopoly on state-funded salaries to rabbis, filing and winning the first ever class action suit regarding exclusion of women, and disqualifying racist candidates from running for Israel's parliament. And we're going to talk about where all of that work is today and why it matters perhaps more than ever before. But Orly and I got to sit together with Sammy yesterday, or 2 days ago now, and I'm just absolutely thrilled to know you in this world and to be able to introduce you and your work to our community. And so Sammy and I are going to be in dialogue with Orly. And I wonder if we can just start, Orly, by asking you to introduce yourself to our community, to tell us a little bit about your story and what brought you into this work, and what do you see as the very essence of this work in this moment?
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here with you. I want to pass over a sign-up sheet. You can sign up for a weekly newsletter. Please go ahead, and it's...
We'll send it out after Shabbat, so folks can sign up afterwards.
Okay, sorry. Because we send out weekly newsletters, and I think that's a very good opportunity for you to keep updated about what's going on in Israel and about IRAC's work. So, as Rabbi Bro said, I've been working at IRAC, the legal and public advocacy arm of the reform movement in Israel, for 19 years. I actually grew up in a secular family. I was born in Canada, but just came back as a baby to Israel and grew up in Israel. And I didn't know anything about liberal Judaism growing up. And 20 years ago, when I moved to where I live today, Mevaseret Zion, which is a suburb of Jerusalem, I looked for a preschool for my oldest son. He was then 3, today he's 26, so it was quite a while ago. And that's how I got to know the reform movement, the local reform movement in Mevaseret Zion, which I've been a member ever since. And through the congregation, I got to my present work. I went to study law because I wanted to do social change. I want to work for Tikkun Olam and to mend what's wrong in this world, and specifically in Israel. And I found my professional home at IRAC, and that's why I've been at IRAC ever since. And we have been working to promote equality, religious pluralism, tolerance in Israel toward all Israelis for many, many years. We've been focusing on issues such as freedom of religion and equality to the liberal streams of Israel, on promoting women's rights, LGBTQ rights, the rights of Israeli Arabs, Palestinians, and assisting new immigrants and converts in getting to Israel and acquiring status in Israel. And as Rabbi Bar said, I think today our work is especially important in the sense that all of our values, and I guess the values that we all share, are threatened by the current Israeli government. The values of equality and dignity for all. We're seeing really the most extreme, racist, misogynistic, and homophobic government that we had in Israel ever. And I think that's what makes our work more important than ever.
Can you share, you can applaud if you want. Orly, can you, we're, as an American Jewish community, watching from afar where we see things just erupting right now on the streets. And I think that everybody knows that part of what's bringing hundreds of thousands of Israelis to the street right now is this judicial overhaul. I'm not sure that everybody understands exactly what's at stake with what this new government is proposing and what the judicial overhaul will actually look like should it come to pass. Can you just, as a human rights attorney, can you just help lay this out for us so that we have a little more clarity and understanding?
Yeah, for sure. Actually, these days, not only you, but also all Israelis have become constitutional law experts because suddenly you have to get to all these details to actually understand what is going on. And so it's true that this government has a lot of things that they intend to do, but the first thing that they're actually doing is this legal revolution. I rather call it revolution and not reform because it is a revolution. Actually, it's a coup that the government is trying to put forward. Now, first you have to understand that Israel's democracy is fragile as it is, okay? Even before this revolution comes to pass. Basically, we don't have a rigid written constitution. We don't have any checks and balances in the Israeli legal system other than the Supreme Court. The government completely controls the Knesset, Israel's parliament, and the only check on the government's power and the protection of minority rights is through the Supreme Court. The Israeli Supreme Court has decided in 1995 that it has the power to invalidate laws, and that was sort of the reasonable result of what is said in one of the basic laws in Israel. We have basic laws which are supposed to be part of the future constitution of Israel. They're supposed to be higher than regular laws, but they can be enacted very like any other law. So you can just enact a law, call it a basic law, and it's sort of supposed to be with a constitutional validity. One of the most important basic laws, which actually is our very thin Bill of Rights, is called the Basic Law, Human Freedom and Dignity. It doesn't even mention the word equality or freedom of speech or freedom of religion, but the Supreme Court interpreted it to mean all of those. And the court said that any law which basically contradicts this basic law could be invalidated by the court. The court did it pretty rarely, so only 20 times since 1995 a law was invalidated by the court, but the right-wing governments over the years have been sort of spreading this fake news that the Supreme Court is too active and is actually running the state. And what they want to do now is they're saying there's sort of bring back the balance, which was never, tilted the other way, but that's how they present it. And they want to change the situation in a number of ways. First of all, they want to control the nomination of judges. In Israel, judges are nominated through a committee, which is comprised of representatives of both politicians, members of the parliament and ministers, and justices. They want to change the composition so as to give the government, the politicians, complete control over nomination of judges. You can say that, here in America, the nomination of judges is politicized, but first of all, I don't know if that's the best way that we should follow. And also, here in the US, you have other checks and balances, right? You have 2 houses of parliament, you have a rigid constitution, you have a president with a veto power, you have regional elections, you have a lot of other mechanisms that we don't have at all in Israel. And so if you change the nomination of judges, it's going to change dramatically the independence of the judiciary and affect the power of the Supreme Court. Next, what they want to do is make it very, very hard for the court to strike down laws. In Israel, the courts does not sit with a full panel of judges. There are all in all 15 justices, but rather in panels usually of 3 judges. In important cases, such as where a law is asked to be invalidated, they're sitting usually with panels of 9 or 11 justices. Now they want to demand a full panel sitting on each such case, 15 judges, and they want to require a majority of 12 out of 15 judges, and that will make it almost impossible to strike down a law. And in addition, if they do strike down a law, they want to give the parliament, the Knesset, an option to override the law. So to say, okay, the court said it's unconstitutional, we'll enact it anyway, and it's basically immune from judicial review. And this is really going to create a situation where there will be no protection for human rights. So they could do anything they want, and the minorities would have no one to turn to.
Thank you so much for explaining that, and I'm sure there are going to be questions about it, so it's a lot for us to take in, but one thing that I've been just particularly horrified by was the statement that Bezalel Smotrich, member of Knesset, said after the pogroms in Huara, the Palestinian town of Huara, 2 weeks ago. And by the way, it's not the language of the left that it's a pogrom. This is what the general who's in charge of overseeing the West Bank called it. He called it a pogrom. And Bezalel Smotrich said that Huara should be wiped off the map, but it should be the state of Israel that does it. It shouldn't be these extremist settlers who go in, it should be the state of Israel. And I've heard many people express concern, well, for the obvious reasons, but also because that's exactly why we need the Supreme Court to have the power to overrule these these legislators, because someone like that could put forward a proposal like that, and if the court's not there to stop it, then we have no protection. And more to the point, Palestinians have no protection, and the people whose dignities are being attacked have nothing at all. Do you see that as a real potential? I mean, it seems very likely that this judicial revolution will come to pass. Is it? I mean, do you see this as a real possibility now that in the weeks and months ahead, such a thing like that will actually come to pass?
Well, I don't think it's going to pass. I think we're going to win. And the reason is that we have hundreds of thousands of Israelis going out to the streets every week. I can tell you that tonight in Israel, 500,000 Israelis went out to the streets for the 10 weeks straight. Imagine it, if we're talking about America, okay, the numbers of American population, it's like 17 million Americans would go to the streets every week for 10 weeks. And we see that the protest is growing every week. And the amazing thing is that we see it's really Israel from all walks of Israeli society, including many people who for many, many years were indifferent. And the current situation, it's very, very bad, but the good news is that it turned many, many Israelis into political activists and into people who go out to the streets and say, we are going to reclaim our country. By the way, we are reclaiming our flag. The Israeli flag, which for many years has been identified with the extreme right, now people are holding it, hundreds of thousands of flags, sea of flags, and people are saying, this is my country, this is my flag, those are my values that I'm standing for, the values for equality, the values of human rights, and the Supreme Court to protect all of us. And it's such a counter response to the government, which is just moving and elating. And I think everyone feels it, when you go out to the streets to the protests. It includes also not only left-wing people, but also people who voted for the center and people who voted for the right-wing, including the government. So many, many voters who voted for this government did not want this judicial revolution, and they definitely did not want it as the way the government is pushing it, in a rushed manner, in a manner which crushes all opposition and doesn't let any people talk and doesn't leave any room for dialogue. People are against this because we don't want to have, a civil war. And sometimes people say we're on the verge of a civil war. No, we want to stop. We want to have a deep dialogue. Let's discuss. Let's have a deep conversation about what the constitutional framework of Israel should be. But we have first to stop this so dangerous and crazy legislation. And most Israelis are with us. So I think that's the good news.
So thank you. I'm glad to hear your optimism. I hope you're right. What I've been hearing from people is that there are some tools that Bougie Herzog, the president of Israel, has, so he might be able to possibly affect the outcome of this, and that the Supreme Court itself might have the ability, if it's passed, to be able to respond. Is that our best hope, or is the hope that somehow, the most elite Air Force pilots saying that they won't fly, Bibi not being able to get a pilot to take him to Rome for his anniversary weekend away with his wife, is the hope that they'll just succumb to the pressure eventually? That he couldn't get a translator or a pilot, which is this weekend, right? So the question is, I'm curious to know, and Sammy, we're going to come to you in just a moment because I want everyone to hear your part of this story too. Is your hope that the pressure continues to mount and ultimately, the legislation is pulled and they move toward compromise, that the president is able to enact some kind of compromise measure, or that the Supreme Court will take it into their own hands and overrule whatever overhaul revolution
First of all, we
comes?
should also say that Netanyahu wasn't able to reach the airport by car because the protesters blocked the entrance to the airport, and so he had to take a helicopter, believe it or not, and escape the country. It's just unbelievable. And we really see phenomena like that never before. You mentioned the fact that people who serve as pilots in reserve duty said that they're not going to serve should those bills pass. This was never the case, and it's really people who say this are the backbones of Israeli society, of the Israeli army. So this is like the first thing ever. Economic implications, high-tech people, economists in Israel who say we are pulling our investments out. We're not going to continue to invest if Israel is going to be not to be a democracy. And I think all of this has a grave influence on the government, have a great influence on Netanyahu. And I want to add another thing, and this is where you come in. I think that the pressure from inside Israel is tremendous, but we need to have outside pressure. Israel is, the homeland of all Jews, And I think it's not only your right, it's your duty to raise a voice that Israel should remain a democracy, should remain to live up to the values that we, the Israel we love. And because we love Israel, because we care deeply about Israel, we should raise a voice. And I think that as we have more and more voices of people from outside Israel calling to stop these bills, this could create a difference. I'm sure a lot of you are part of many Jewish organizations and can cause many, many more people and bodies to raise a voice against this. We have seen this in the past weeks. More and more people, more and more organizations have talked against it. You mentioned Smotrich, the finance minister. He's going to visit DC next week. And no Jewish organization is going to meet him other than the Israel Bonds. So AIPAC is not going to meet him. And that was like the first thing ever. Because they understand that's a moment of crisis like never before. It's not a regular time. It's the time to stop and scream out loud, we won't allow this to happen. We have to make sure the Jewish state, the only Jewish state, remains a democracy. And I think it's, if we, all of us, continue at this precise moment to say this, we can stop this from happening.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. And I know that many people here are deeply involved already, and hopefully will get more actively involved. American Jews do not have a muscle for this kind of resistance when it comes to Israel, even though we have the muscle when it comes to resisting our American government. But I think we have a general posture that, like the common wisdom, the script here is you don't want to speak out against human rights abuses in Israel because there's so much anti-Semitism and Israel's so vulnerable and so fragile. And as a result, we really have, I think, as an overall, not the Ikar community, not all of us, but I think the American Jewish community has really failed to step forward with the moral voice that we need. And when our Israeli siblings are calling us to the street, I think we have to answer. And by the way,
thank you, Rabbi Bruce, for your clear voice, because your clear voice made an impact not only here, but also in Israel. It's tremendous to hear your voice, because it's, this solidarity with us is so meaningful to us.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that. I will say there's a protest. There are these unacceptable protests that are happening all around the country. And I went last week for the first time on Sunday. It's at the Federal Building, and it's mostly Israeli Americans. And they're like, where are the American Jews? So where are we? And can we show our support with our Israeli siblings when they're asking us to? And I know Gary's trying to organize a conversation amongst Ikarites, and Janet's super involved. Like, many of us are deeply involved in this conversation. So we'll continue to advance this conversation in the days and weeks ahead. But thank you for the clarity of your call. The work that you do, it matters more than ever now. It also was profoundly important before this administration, and that's because fighting for equality and fighting for justice and dignity was always really central work. And this is where Sammy Kanter comes in. And Sammy, who's our Rabbinic Intern, I would love, when I said that Orly was coming, Sammy said, "Oh wow, she helped me with my claim when I was studying in Israel." And I don't think that our community knows your story, this part of your story. And so I would love for you to share, and maybe the two of you can talk a little bit about how you work together on this case and the work that you do for LGBTQ rights and for women and for pluralism. So.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm very excited Orly's here. We worked together a lot during my year in Israel with Hebrew Union College, which was in 2019. So, and this case, I think, will illustrate a little bit about some of the work IRAC is doing every day on the ground in the court system. So I had been in Israel for a couple months in Jerusalem, and it was Jerusalem Pride on a Thursday. And so we marched in the parade, and IRAC marched, and HUC, and it's an amazing parade if you haven't been yet. And on the Friday after the parade, I was at a party for Pride with some of my friends. Julia Berg, who's in the back there, who's an Ikarite. You can wave. She was there too, to give her a shout out. And I was wearing a tank top with, it said Cincinnati in like rainbow colors. And after the party, we were looking for something to eat around 5 o'clock in Jerusalem, which, is kind of that moment when things are closing and Shabbat is coming in. And we come across this pizza place on Ben Yehuda Street, and we walk in, and there were other people in there, and they were still serving. And one of the guy behind the counter looked up, and he just said, "Ata homo?" Like, "Are you gay?" And I was like, "Yeah." And excuse me. And he was like, "Get out." And we were like, "What?" Like, well, we kind of looked at each other like, what? He's like, "Get out." And we we start, wait, is he serious? And he's yelling, get out in English. And so like we were kind of like, what is going on? And one of my friends, Ben, was getting like very kind of fired up, like, are you kidding me? And then this other guy came and used kind of like his imposing like body to like to really get us out, and kind of came toward us, and we like ran up the street, and we had this moment here. We had just gotten to Israel and Jerusalem, and we're like, what is happening? Like, is this real? Like, we can't even get pizza, like what? It was just, we were baffled by it, and really hurt, and we then went to the Jachnun bar, which is probably better than that pizza place. But my friend and classmate Ben posted in a Facebook group called Secret Jerusalem, like, don't go to this pizza place. This is what happened. And after about 20 minutes, he looked and he said, this post is going viral. Like, this post is exploding. And so we were like, really? Like, I assumed that, unfortunately, that discrimination happened a lot, and probably does happen a lot in Israel, but I didn't think, I was like, I guess this just happens, and this is what's going to happen. And before Shabbat was coming in, it was a late Shabbat, like all of a sudden, people started calling us, the media and lawyers, and this post was exploding. After Shabbat, I was on the phone with school, and people were really like, the case was captivating people, and actually was was more than what we thought. And then the next morning, Orly called, and she said, this is against the law, and we could go to court about this. And I thought, okay, like this is not what I expected coming to studying here in Israel, but why not? Like you were so like warm and like, let's do this. Like, we need to take this to court. Like, this is illegal. And so it started this year-long process where we worked together and put together this case, went to court, and we won. So we won. It was a long process, and it was just an amazing. I don't know if you have other things to add about it, but it was amazing to see IRAC's work, and also for me, I found this new connection with Israelis, because I was working with IRAC, a lot of queer leaders, a lot of people that I found were exactly like me and had my values, but weren't able to really lift up their voices in the way that I think they should have. And so I claim that really strengthened my relationship, I think, with Israel, because I saw, there are a lot of people just like me that I need to stand with and be with. And I donated most of the money to IRAC and the Jerusalem Open House, which is supporting queer people in Israel.
And we had a pizza party when you got the check. When you got the check, we got all the IRAC staff, and we said, let's have a pizza party in honor of Sammy, right?
Yeah, we did. So it was a really incredible experience, a different place.
Did you get an apology from them again?
No, absolutely no way. They were not remorseful in any way. I don't know. They were not.
They just had a fork over money.
Yes.
No, but I think the important thing is that what we have been trying to do for many years, and Sammy's case is a good example, is to let people understand that discrimination is not only illegal, it carries a price. And if you have to compensate someone who was discriminated against, even if it's not like a ton of money, then you would think twice if you do it the next time. And it is a very powerful tool to change behavior of people. So we did it with like women who drivers sent to the back of the bus. So we sued the driver. We just had a case which ended 2 weeks ago of a woman who the driver did not let board a bus in Jerusalem. He told her there is room for 12 men. So we sued him, we sued the bus company, and we won. So next time he won't do it. And the same, we represented an Arab guy who actually, a story similar to you, he just went to a store in downtown Jerusalem, and the guy said, just go, I don't want to serve you. We sued him, and he won compensation, and it's a very powerful tool. Now, it's true that now they're going to change everything. I mean, it's not that the current situation is perfect, but at least in theory, we have laws to fight it. We have the courts to protect us. Now they want to change all of it. So even under the current circumstance, we have a lot of work to do, but now they want to change, the whole rules of the game.
Right, and in fact, one of the ministers whose name keeps coming up in this space calls himself a homophobic fascist, right, or a fascistic homophobe. I can't remember which way, but either way, not good.
Oh, and actually they wanted, like one of the intents of the government, which they have not done until now, they wanted to change this law, the law according to which we filed Sammy's suit, to allow people to refuse to give services to others according to their religious beliefs. To basically to allow people to say, okay, I'm a doctor, you're an Arab, or you're a gay person, or you're from Jew, I don't want to serve you. And the amazing thing was that it was published, and the uproar in the Israeli public was so amazing that they soon retracted, because they figured that the Israeli public is against it. You know, most of the Israelis are for gay rights, they're for religious freedom, they're for women's rights, and they're against this. So it was amazing to see the support of the public.
This is incredible. This story is truly incredible, and I'm so glad we get to share this with our community. So thank you, Sammy, for sharing
And thank you for Sammy, because you know it's not obvious that a person who comes to study in Israel for a year take this and challenge this, and it it really needed courage, and kudos, kol hakavod.
I want to say, I want to point out something that Sammy said that I think is really important. You said it actually made you feel closer to Israel because you found that there were people fighting the same fight over there. And I think one of the fears about the way the American Jewish community enters this conversation is that if we are critical of any Israeli government, institution, or policy, that it will distance us from Israel and make us not feel this kind of attachment. But I think in my experience, it's been the opposite, that when we're able to connect with organizers and activists and human rights attorneys on the ground, that we feel such a deeper affinity and connection, because it feels like these are people who are working every day to promote the same values that we hold over here. And I think it helps us also identify with people with, as I said earlier, a strong resistance muscle when it comes to our own country and our own government. We understand what our obligation is to fight in the United States. To know that there are people like you who are fighting this fight over there, I think it only strengthens the bond and the attachment rather than diminishing it. I want to ask you this is kind of a hard question, but look, I think, I don't know if folks are aware of this, but I want to talk about the role of funding that comes from the United States, from a few select billionaires, that has really fueled this rightward shift in Israeli politics. It's hard to talk about it because I think when people talk about Jews and money, it often takes us right into anti-Semitic tropes. And so we need to do that very carefully. And also at the same time, I think we understand that the Kohelet Forum, which is funded by money that comes from the United States, is what's responsible for this judicial revolution. And I know that much of the settlement enterprise is actually funded by some very right-wing forces here in the United States, not all Jewish, also some evangelical. And so how do you and how should we respond to that?
So yeah, I think it's a very important point. I think, a few weeks ago, the American ambassador in Israel, Tom Knights, told Netanyahu, you have to pump the brakes to the legal revolution. And then the Diaspora Affairs Ministry told him, I think you should mind your own business. And then the American ambassador said, I don't think you want America to mind its own business. You want America to mind Israel's business, but that's aside. But, America does influence Israel to a certain, in a certain political way. And for years, there has been a lot of money gone to the far right, to the extreme right, even to far right organizations such as Lehava, which is a racist organization basically using violence against Arabs and against mixed couples of Jews and Arabs. So we see it for many, many years creating the infrastructure to change the Israeli legal system. And it's actually now occurring before our eyes, but this is something they have been working on for many, many, many years. So I think it's a very good example of why Americans shouldn't stay silent, but rather say, okay, people use American money and American influence to destroy Israel's democracy. We have to protect it. This is our duty to counter this and actually bring our voices of liberal values to the forefront. So for sure.
Thank you. I'm going to ask one more question, and then Sammy, if you have a question, then we'll open it up for a quick Q&A here, and then send people home for your Shabbos nap. So I read in your bio just a few moments ago that some of the work of IRAC has been to prevent racist candidates from running for the Knesset. So can you talk a little bit about where that is now and how it came to be that some of these folks are even in the government, given what Israel's history is and the stance that they've taken in previous iterations against having people holding truly nefarious views from being able to come into positions of power like that?
Yeah, so we have been fighting racism for probably 2 decades now, and our slogan, which is on one of the magnets that you can pull on your way out, is racism is not our Judaism. So we go against those who use the Jewish religion to incite against Arabs, to incite racism, to incite violence toward people who are non-Jews. And unfortunately, there are quite a lot of people who do this, some of them religious leaders, some of them rabbis, even in formal posts employed by the state, who use their position to just incite and encourage hatred. And we've been leading long fights against those people, demanding that they be brought to justice, because this is a criminal offense in Israel, and if they're part of the civil service, then they should undergo disciplinary proceedings, because they're violating their duty to act toward everyone respectfully and equally and with dignity. After Meir Kahane was elected to the Knesset, to Israel's parliament in the 80s, the very, very racist Rabbi Meir Kahane, the law was changed, and the current Israeli law states that a person could be disqualified from running to the parliament if he's a racist. But over the years, nobody was disqualified since 1992, since Meir Kahane's party was disqualified, because the Supreme Court said you have to bring a lot of evidence in order to take from someone the important right in a democracy to be elected, to be a member of the parliament. 4 years ago, in 2019, we asked the Supreme Court to disqualify 4 racist candidates who belong to the Jewish Strength Party. It's a racist party which is basically the follower of Meir Kahane's party. For the first time, the Supreme Court disqualified a candidate for the first time in 30 years, and they disqualified 3 candidates, Michael Ben-Ari, Baruch Marzel, and Ben-Zion Gobstein, all of them really for horrible, horrible racist remarks. We brought a lot of videos and recordings of them saying horrible things, which I don't want to repeat, about Israeli Arabs. Unfortunately, the 4th one was not disqualified. His name is Itamar Ben-Gvir, and he is the current Minister of Internal Security. I can tell you that we brought a lot of evidence, but he wasn't disqualified. Unfortunately, we tried to disqualify him twice. And I think the current situation is very dangerous in the sense that, the Supreme Court did draw a red line saying those people cannot be part of Israel's parliament because of the racism, and the court decision is very moving. It talks about the history of the Jewish people and the fact that we, because of what we've gone through, have to be extremely sensitive to the need to fight racism, and we should be the first ones who fight racism. And unfortunately, we do have explicit racists in the Knesset and in the government. I think this is very, very worrying and concerning. I think the fact that the religious Zionism party, which includes the Jewish Strength Party, received so many votes is troubling. Many young people voted for it. I don't think that everybody who voted for it are racists. I think some people, voted for it because they were looking for like this strong man to deal with security issues, and I guess they will see now that Ben-Gvir cannot really deal with the issues. He's just making things worse. And I do hope that it will sort of open people's eyes. And I think the protest, the fact that we have this really broad protest, hopefully we'll be able to translate it into political change and to create, a new sort of infrastructure for the Israeli liberal camp, which of course includes the need to fight racism, which is, one of the most important issues we should deal with.
Orly, I'm wondering how we can get involved and help. You mentioned raising our voice. We talked about strengthening our bonds with liberal Israelis, similar Israelis to our values. And I'm wondering if you have ways or thoughts on how we can take action in this moment.
Yeah, so I think I didn't mention, I think you should actually get in touch with your elected representatives and ask them to raise a voice. I can tell you that we have been in touch through the Reform and Conservative movements have asked Jewish members of Congress to write to Netanyahu, and 16 of them actually wrote a letter this week urging him to stop the legislation. I know that J Street organized a letter of over 90 members of Congress who wrote to Biden and told him, you have to say something, and I think this is a very important avenue. I think especially the message should be that you should tell to people, don't give up on us. Because I know some people would say, Israel as it is such a balagan, it's such a difficult place. And I say, it's like you haven't given up on America, right? When Trump was elected, don't give up on us, but rather help us, help the people on the ground who try to fight those dangerous trends. And I think your voices and your support and the fact that we know that you're with us really gives us the courage and energy to continue this very long and exhausting marathon.
Well, thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you. We're going to take a couple oh, wow, there are a lot of questions. We're not going to take them all. I'm sorry. But we'll start with Sherry. And also, would folks mind please introducing yourselves before you speak? And Jess is coming around with the mic. Thank you, Jess.
So my name is Sherry Moore, and I'm very happy to hear your remarks today, and Tammy as well. I'm curious, what is the response or the future planning in terms of the actions of the settlers who destroyed that village?
Good question. I do hope they will be brought to justice, but according to previous experience, I'm a little skeptical about that. The thing that's going on in the West Bank is very troubling. By the way, even at the time of the previous government, which was a much better government, there was a lot of settlers' violence that was not, for some reason, answered the way it should have been. But I can tell you that it did sort of create a shift in how people think. Rabbi Bruce, you mentioned the Hawara, the program in Hawara. A few days afterwards, people protested in Tel Aviv, and the police was very violent toward them. And people started chanting, "Where were you in Hawara?" So people sort of start to connect the dots that everything is connected, right? So our struggle to keep Israel democracy has to take in mind that we have horrible things being done in the West Bank. And I think the fact that people start to make this connection is incredible and so important at this point of time. So hopefully it will create some change.
So as Rabbi Brous said, I volunteered this week to be able to organize a discussion among us exactly what Orly is suggesting that we do. So because we're not writing on Shabbat, I'm giving you all my email, which is very simple. It's Gary@GaryWexler.com, Gary@GaryWexler.com, Gary@GaryWexler.com. Okay, so if you are interested, it's going to be on Zoom. I want to do it this week. There's no time to be wasting here. And any other IKAR rights, you know, that's number one. Number two, I want to say something to you, Orly. I have worked with the Tikva people, I have worked with the Shalem people, I have worked with the Kohelet people several years ago before they became who they became. It's not only about money. Yes, it is about their billions of dollars, but these people are brilliant, they are strategic, they are intellectuals, they are informed, and if we want to be able to defeat this, we have to, because I was listening in this room when Sharon was talking even about the Netanyahus in Italy, people were shocked. Folks, this has been in the news all week. If we're going to be an effective advocacy group, we have to be informed. You need to be reading the Times of Israel in English. You need to be reading Haaretz. You need to know what's going on, so it's not just Sharon informing us, but that we ourselves are out there knowing what's happening, because we will never defeat these Kohelet people unless we are informed, unless we're readers, intellectual, strategic. I'm done.
For sure, I can just tell you that there was yesterday the daily podcast of the New York Times was about the legal revolution yesterday, so you can get some more information there. I think it was a really important episode.
The podcast is called The Daily. I was going to bring it up too, so a second reminder, The Daily, the podcast is about Israel. What I wanted to tell everyone is my name's Janet Halbert. I'm involved in J Street. If anyone wants to find out about J Street, I'm happy to help you get access into J Street, contacting our members. Sydney Kamlager-Dove was the first freshman to sign on to the 92 other co-signers of the letter to to President Biden asking him to de-escalate. I'm going to be at the protest tomorrow at the Federal Building. If anyone wants to come, it's at 11 a.m. Get there early so you get a good parking space and find me, and I'm happy to be with all of you there. The other thing I wanted to ask you is, what about the Palestinian citizens of Israel? How are they affected right now? And could you share with us some of the work that you're doing about the Palestinian citizens of Israel? Thank you.
So yeah, first of all, about our work, we have a Racism Crisis Center that we opened 6 years ago, and we offer legal representation and also mental health assistance to victims of racism. There are different victims of racism, but of course the biggest chunk is Arabs. We deal with issues such as racial profiling, refusal to grant services, which we gave you an idea. We have an unbelievable class action suit against a cab company app like Uber. In Israel, it's called Get, and they operate a special service only in Jerusalem called Get Mehadrin. It's seemingly cabs which do not drive on Shabbat. Actually, it's a service of Jewish cab drivers only, so no Arab cab drivers, believe it or not. And that's been going on since 2015. So we challenged it in court. It's still going on, but I believe we'll be able to abolish the service. So that's just, an example of the stuff we do. The current protests in Israel are Jewish. They're Zionists, they're Jewish, and the Israeli Palestinians are not part of it. Which is very painful. It's a very big price to pay. Some people, Israeli Palestinians that I've spoken to, including people on my staff, tell me it's very hard for us to be part of it because we never felt Israel as democracy. So now you woke up to say there is no democracy. What I say to them is, it's true, we have a lot of things to fix, but that's like changing the whole system. So first of all, we have to make sure we have the system and then trying to fix it and make it work. But it's true that they're not part of it at all. I know that when they're sort of assigning speakers to the different protests in recent weeks, they have, the organizers have tried to put on Palestinian speakers. Like I was just speaking with my husband on the protests in Jerusalem, and I just heard an Israel Palestinian speaking. So there is sort of an effort to try to make them part of the protests, but it's a little hard because it's so. It's the color of, the Israeli flag is so part of it that Israeli Palestinians feels left out.
I want to add to this while we're bringing the mic over to Rabbi Artson. If I don't know where Jess went. Oh, thank you, Jess. That I was talking, that Daniel Sokach said the other day, who's the CEO of the New Israel Fund and a founder of ICAR, by the way, 19 years ago. And Daniel said, and NIF actually funded some of the earliest protests when there were Israeli and Palestinian flags at these events. And it was Omdim Biachad, who we brought here to speak, Alon Lee Green and Sally Abed, who were in those early protests. And then you saw the Palestinian flag sort of disappear and hundreds of thousands of Israeli flags appear and people. And what Daniel said was, make no mistake, we are not trying to get back to where we were 6 months ago. We're trying to imagine a different kind of future because where we were 6 months ago worked for some people and it didn't work for a lot of people. And so the hope is that, just like in America, we use this language a lot at the beginning of COVID, that, this was a major awakening, and the hope was not that we could get back to normal. The hope was that we could create a new normal that would be one in which everybody had paid sick leave, and one in which, everybody could afford medication, and in which we could deal with all of the racist disparities that are part of our country. So I just also am adding that piece to this as well. Rabbi Artson.
So two things. First of all, Sammy, I've had a lot of respect for you up until now. I didn't know you were a hero in the way that you just revealed. So thank you for that. My question is, I worry that all the people on the streets are never going to vote for Netanyahu anyway, and he's smart enough to know that. And so he's counting numbers. And he's already demonstrated he'll make a coalition with anybody for the sake of his own power. And he's a very shrewd politician whose policies I hate. But he's really smart and he's very talented. And the left at the same time went into this election saying, your fingernails are a little too long, I can't be in a coalition with you, and I don't like your hairstyle, so I can't be in a coalition with you. And we are notorious, the liberals and the progressives, for devouring each other for minute shades of difference that no one on the outside would notice. Sorry, that's an editorial. Is there an electoral strategy so that we're not constantly wasting liberal and progressive votes, which end up then empowering the most offensive possible right-wing government?
Yeah, that's a great question. First, I want to say about Netanyahu, it's true that he's a very shrewd and sophisticated politician, but he miscalculated big time this time, okay? He was sure he's going to pass this legal revolution in 2-3 weeks. He never first predicted such a wide an ongoing protest. So that's one. And by the way, if you have seen him in his public appearances, he looks like the worst ever. He's not in control anymore. I mean, he's lost. It seems like he has. Yeah, yeah. It seems that he's like in the worst position ever. And by the way, according to current surveys, if the elections would have been today, he wouldn't have had a majority. So people who voted for him would not have necessarily voted for him again. And according to other surveys, you see that people, including people who voted for him, are against this legal revolution. People who voted for the coalition were asked, what is the most important thing the government should do? And only 6% said the legal revolution. So people said the cost of living, security issues, they don't care about it. And people say, why are you ruining the country for this? It's not that important. It's important for Justice Yariv Levin and Simcha Rotman, who is the head of the Constitutional Law and Justice Committee, who are Kohelet people for a long time and what they want to do. But most Israelis are against it. So first of all, politically, I'm not sure people would have voted the same as they did in November. It's true that the liberal camp was like disorganized to an unbelievable extent, and people in Israel are so angry about the leaders of the current political parties. And you see also this trend that Israel is moving to the right? So people who used to vote left are now voting center, and people who vote center vote right, and people who used to vote right vote extreme right? I mean, the Likud used to be a sort of center-right party. It was a liberal party which believed in human rights. The basic law that I mentioned, human dignity and freedom, was passed by the Likud. I mean, they voted for it. They boycott Kahana. They would never, ever, like Menachem Begin, would never sit with those people in the government. So in this sense, things have changed. I completely agree with you that we have to reinvent the Israeli liberal camp, the Israeli left. Something is not working. I think it's not only like the divisions among the parties. I think that a lot of young people do not feel related or belonging. And I think this is something, by the way, it's like a global phenomenon. People don't buy the story or the narrative that we try to sell on the liberal camp. Okay, there are this, human rights, global issues. People want a sense of belonging. They want to feel part of someone. And in Israel, a lot of people vote for the Likud because that's what they feel. It's, in Israel, it was also a lot about you want for Netanyahu or you're against Netanyahu, and people are like, oh, he's being, chased by the Attorney General. We are for him because he's the underdog, which is, of course, a complete nonsense. But so we have a lot of challenges. I think the amazing thing about the protests that it's not led from the top. It's completely bottom up. It's like people just going out to the streets and nobody organizes them, which in the sense is amazing. But the downside is that it's not organized, and now we have to translate it into real political change. And for this, by the way, we need leaders. Okay, we need amazing leaders. I can tell you one leader, which I think is amazing, who is Rabbi Gilad Kariv. He was the CEO of the Reform Movement in Israel, and he's the first Reform rabbi to be a member of the Knesset. His voice is a very clear voice for human rights, for democracy, against occupation. So I see him as, a big hope, but I think we have to see how we're going to take this amazing energy and channel it into political change, and that's definitely like the next big challenge.
I see. Okay, well, I'm gonna take two last comments. I see Florine and Jeff, and while we're bringing the mic over, I think what you just said about belonging is so critical, and it's the same thing that we saw here in America. There's an illogic to the way that people vote, and my hope is that all of these hundreds of thousands of people taking to the street week after week is creating a new sense of community and connection and belonging that will hopefully fuel this kind of political revolution that needs to happen, and that it doesn't happen there. What happened here, which is after 5 million Americans took to the streets in the Women's March around the country, it was half an hour before people started the circular firing squad and just going after each other. And so I hope you're able to maintain there this sense of real connection to each other that hopefully will fuel the next chapter for us. Florine, and then Jeff, and then we'll close.
Yeah, I'm concerned about the design of a Supreme Court. I worked for the United States Commission on Civil Rights, 1967, 2 years after the Civil Rights Act was passed. In those days, we have a constitution, you do not, written with. I really believed in the Supreme Court system. I don't now. I'm concerned how democratic countries, Israel, the United States, and many others, will have to depoliticize their systems, maybe have rotating judges, maybe merit-based judgeships, blah, blah, blah. Whatever the system, it needs to be changed. It's politicized. So I want to know what your dream is for the Israeli Supreme Court system.
Well, it's a good question because, some people have said, well, you put all your money on the Supreme Court, but look at our court, right? We lost the court. So what about that? I mean, if you have a very problematic court that does not protect human rights, but rather infringes on human rights, then what is left? Well, but in Israel, we don't have any other choice. Like for now, this is our beacon which is supposed to protect us. I think that if we make sure that the nomination process of judges is not politicized in Israel, then we would be able to prevent this. But it's true that that's a risk that we have to figure out how to avoid. It's true. Yeah, I think if we give a fight and we stop this bills from happening, I think we'll be able to maintain a court which it's not a super liberal court in Israel. I mean, it really, because it also depends on the panel which is assigned to the case, it could really differ. Like I could get a liberal panel, I could get a conservative panel, but it's still, you can sort of understand, it's a professional court, it's not deciding according to political considerations, and in this sense, this is something we have to maintain to keep it going.
Thank you. Thank you. Jeff.
Okay, hi. Hi, I'm Jeff. I'm torn. How do we talk to elected officials, especially in Congress, with a decrease or with a decrease of support for Israel? How do we communicate that we're asking them to still support Israel, but it's on this particular issue that we want them to raise their voice on?
I think that, of course, we don't want America to stop supporting Israel, but I think it's enough for the Biden administration to raise a very clear voice saying that this is unacceptable, that it could have an effect. Because what, have been said up until now by Biden, by Blinken, by others, was not strong enough. It was just a concern. I think if they would use stronger words, then the message would be very clear. And I think that Netanyahu, with everything I said about him, like Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, they don't care about anything. Like they would burn everything. Netanyahu still understands the need, of course, of the support of the Biden administration, the importance of the relationship between Israel and the United States. And so I think a clear word from the administration could make a real difference. Again, together with the protests and together with all of the other issues, could really create a difference and stop this craziness from going on.
Yeah, and Jeff, thank you for that question. I've heard this from a number of people, which is we want, people who certainly want the United States to use the government to use its voice as effectively as possible to try to shift course, but don't want to cut funding for the Iron Dome, for example. And then many more people will die. And so I think that that's a tension that many people are feeling. So thank you for voicing that for a lot of others. We're gonna wrap up. Orly, I thank you so much. Orly's on like a 3-week trip to the States. It's really hard, I'm sure, to be away from your family and to be away from your country when all of this is going down over there. I think I can speak on behalf of Sammy and me and our whole team here. We're so deeply moved by the work that you do and so grateful for you. And I just want to give you chizuk. I hope that in the days ahead, when you're facing the hardest moments, that you know that there are many people in this country who really have your back and will support you and will continue to amplify and to support this incredible work. If folks are looking for a great way to support this financially and through sharing with other people about IRAC, I hope that you'll do that as well. And my blessings to you for health and continued moral clarity and great strength in body and spirit in the days ahead.
Thank you so much. And it's indeed very hard to be away from Israel now, but I feel that my presence here is so important because I see the deep concern of Jews from all over the world, and I keep writing to my staff, you don't understand how our work and how the protest is important to people abroad, and it strengthens us so much. So I want to thank you for your support, and you can find us at IRAC.org. Gary said about his IRAC.org, that's easy. Go ahead, you can find... So you can get a lot of other information about what we do and, keep up, and you can subscribe to our weekly newsletter, and I'd be very happy to have you on board. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Thank you. We're gonna say Birkat Hamazon. You can grab some of the magnets on your way out, and if you have plates here, please help our team by getting them out. Thank you to Jess and to our whole tech team for helping, and thank you to our folks who are watching from home. We're deeply grateful to all of you. Join us on Tuesday night for our event that we talked about earlier today with Representative Kamala Gerdov that Sam Hutman organized at the Skirball on the Tree of Life. Thank you all.